When Hollywood power meets authentic knowledge, empires crumble in real time. What you're about to witness is the moment when one man's racist excuse encountered someone who knew the actual history better than he did. This isn't just entertainment drama. This is the day manufactured authority met genuine expertise and lost everything. Subscribe now for more explosive moments when Hollywood legends discovered their assumptions were built on ignorance. These untold stories of courage and education are just getting started. What happens when Hollywood's most powerful actor-producer bans someone from his movie set using historical accuracy as an excuse? In 1960, Kirk Douglas was at the peak of his power, controlling every aspect of his epic film Spartacus. But when he used ancient Roman history to justify excluding Sammy Davis Jr., what followed exposed just how little the expert actually knew. This is the explosive story of how 0.04 seconds destroyed Hollywood authority forever. August 1960. The Spartacus production was the most ambitious project in Hollywood history, with Kirk Douglas serving as both star and producer, wielding unprecedented creative control. At 44, Douglas was at the zenith of his career, commanding respect as both a dramatic powerhouse and a shrewd businessman who understood every aspect of film production. The movie was being filmed at Universal Studios, on elaborate sets that recreated ancient Rome with meticulous attention to historical detail. Douglas had invested millions of dollars and his entire reputation in creating what he believed would be the definitive epic about the famous gladiator rebellion. Kirk was obsessed with authenticity, recalled assistant director Robert Lawrence. He had historians consulting on everything from costumes to battle tactics. He wanted Spartacus to be taken seriously as both entertainment and historical education. This obsession with historical accuracy would lead to one of the most educational encounters in Hollywood history. The incident began during a routine set visit by several entertainment industry professionals who were touring the elaborate Roman constructions. Among the visitors was Sammy Davis Jr., who was exploring potential collaboration opportunities with Universal Studios and had requested a behind-the-scenes look at Hollywood's most expensive production. But to Douglas, Sammy's presence represented a problem that threatened the historical integrity he was working so hard to maintain. Kirk had very specific ideas about what ancient Rome should look like on screen, remembered costume designer Bill Thomas, who witnessed the confrontation. He believed that including black performers in Roman settings would undermine the historical authenticity that distinguished Spartacus from typical Hollywood spectacles. The tension escalated when Sammy expressed genuine interest in the historical research that had gone into the production design. Instead of welcoming professional curiosity, Douglas saw an opportunity to establish his authority as the project's historical expert. "Sammy," Douglas announced loudly enough for other set visitors to hear, his voice carrying the gravelly intensity that had made him famous. "I appreciate your interest in our production, but I think there's been a misunderstanding about what Spartacus represents historically." It was a calculated statement designed to position Douglas as the educational authority, while implying that Sammy lacked the historical knowledge to understand the project's scholarly foundation. Sammy looked up from examining a detailed reproduction of Roman military equipment, recognizing the implicit challenge but maintaining his characteristic diplomatic composure. "That's interesting, Kirk," Sammy replied with genuine curiosity. "What specific historical research have you been using for the production design?" The question was asked with respectful attention rather than defensiveness, which caught Douglas off guard. He had expected either deference to his expertise or defensive justification for visiting the set. "Extensive consultation with classical historians," Douglas replied confidently. "We've worked with experts from major universities to ensure that every detail reflects authentic Roman culture. That's why we've been very careful about casting decisions. We want to maintain historical accuracy rather than compromise for modern entertainment considerations." The implication was clear. Including black performers would represent compromise rather than historical authenticity. Sammy nodded thoughtfully, as if receiving valuable educational information about ancient Roman historical research and scholarly methodology. So you're saying that historical accuracy requires excluding black performers from Roman settings? Sammy asked with the kind of respectful engagement that indicated he was taking Douglas's expertise seriously. Exactly. Douglas confirmed, pleased, that his historical analysis was being properly understood. Ancient Rome was a Mediterranean civilization with specific ethnic characteristics. Responsible filmmaking requires respecting those historical realities rather than imposing modern sensibilities on ancient cultures. The explanation was delivered with the conviction of someone whose extensive research had provided definitive answers about Roman demographic composition and cultural authenticity. That's a fascinating approach to historical research, Sammy agreed. Very comprehensive methodology for ensuring accuracy. He maintained his respectful demeanor while continuing. Though I wonder if there might be some gaps in the historical consultation that could provide additional context about Roman ethnic diversity. Douglas's competitive instincts engaged immediately, sensing that his historical expertise was being questioned by someone who presumably lacked comparable scholarly credentials. I think our research has been quite thorough, Douglas said with the conviction of someone whose expensive historical consultation had provided complete understanding of Roman civilization. We've consulted primary sources, archaeological evidence, and leading academic experts. The demographic composition of ancient Rome is well-established historical fact. The assessment carried clear implications about Douglas's evaluation of Sammy's historical knowledge, that any alternative perspective would represent entertainment speculation rather than scholarly understanding. But instead of deferring to Douglas's apparent expertise, Sammy did something that would transform the entire conversation from professional dismissal into comprehensive education. "Kirk," Sammy said, his voice carrying the kind of calm directness that indicated he was about to address something more serious than casual historical discussion, "I think there might be some significant gaps in your historical research that could affect the authenticity you're trying to achieve." The suggestion created immediate tension among the assembled set visitors, who recognized that they were about to witness either educational exchange or professional confrontation between Hollywood's most powerful producer and one of entertainment's most respected performers. "What kind of gaps?" Douglas asked, though his tone indicated confidence that comprehensive research had eliminated any significant omissions from his historical understanding. "Roman demographic diversity," Sammy replied simply. "Your research seems to have missed some fairly fundamental information about ethnic composition in the Roman Empire, particularly regarding African populations." What followed was not just historical correction, it was a masterclass in how authentic knowledge could demolish assumed expertise and challenge fundamental assumptions about cultural authority and scholarly credibility. "Kirk, ancient Rome was one of the most ethnically diverse civilizations in human history," Sammy began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had clearly studied the subject extensively. The Roman Empire extended throughout North Africa, and African populations weren't just present, they were integral to Roman military, political, and cultural leadership. Douglas listened with growing discomfort as his expensive historical consultation was challenged by information that contradicted everything his experts had told him. Septimius Severus, Roman emperor from 193 to 211 AD, was African. Sammy continued with calm precision. Born in modern Libya, ruled the entire Roman Empire during one of its most powerful periods. Hardly a peripheral figure, he was literally the Caesar. The historical fact hit Douglas like a physical blow because it directly contradicted the demographic assumptions that had guided his entire casting philosophy. "Then there's Terence, the playwright whose works influenced Roman literature for centuries," Sammy continued. "African. St. Augustine, one of the most important theological figures in Roman Christianity. African. Marcus Cornelius Fronto, tutor to Marcus Aurelius. African." Each example was delivered with the kind of scholarly precision that indicated deep familiarity with primary sources rather than casual entertainment industry knowledge. "But more importantly for your Spartacus project," Sammy said, gladiatorial schools regularly included fighters from throughout the empire, including significant African populations who were considered among the most skilled and feared warriors in the arena. The information was devastating for Douglas because it revealed that his historically accurate exclusion of black performers was actually historically inaccurate, based on incomplete research and cultural assumptions rather than scholarly evidence. Your historical consultants either didn't research African populations in ancient Rome or they deliberately omitted that information. Sammy concluded gently. Either way, excluding black performers from Roman settings isn't historically accurate. It's historically ignorant. Douglas stood in complete silence for nearly a minute, processing the implications of what he had just learned. Everything he understood about Roman demographics, everything his expensive consultants had told him, everything that justified his casting decisions had just been revealed as fundamentally flawed. "How do you know all this?" Douglas finally asked, his voice carrying the bewilderment of someone whose expertise had just been comprehensively surpassed by someone he had assumed was less knowledgeable. Sammy's response revealed not just superior historical knowledge, but the difference between expensive consultation and genuine scholarly interest. "I've been fascinated by ancient history since I was a kid," Sammy explained with obvious sincerity. "When you're a black performer in America, you learn to research the historical contributions that get left out of standard education. Roman Africa has been a particular interest because it challenges so many assumptions about ancient civilizations." The explanation revealed why Sammy's knowledge was more comprehensive than Douglas's expensive research. It was motivated by personal curiosity rather than professional necessity, and it included perspectives that mainstream historical consultation often omitted. "I've read Cassius Dio, Tacitus, Pliny, the primary sources your consultants should have been using," Sammy continued. "I've studied archaeological evidence from Roman North Africa. I've researched gladiatorial records that specifically mention African fighters." Douglas listened with the fascination of someone discovering that his area of presumed expertise contained dimensions he had never previously considered. But the educational experience wasn't finished. What happened next would become legendary among the Spartacus cast and crew as an example of how authentic capability could transcend any category, including historical knowledge. "Kirk," Sammy said, "since you mentioned gladiatorial authenticity, would you be interested in a practical demonstration of what Roman arena combat actually involved?" The suggestion evolved quickly into something that would test not just historical knowledge, but the practical capabilities that made ancient Roman entertainment so compelling for audiences. Within minutes, what had begun as a discussion about historical casting had transformed into a demonstration using the authentic gladiatorial equipment that Douglas had commissioned for the film. Douglas, still confident in his physical capabilities and extensive preparation for playing Spartacus, agreed to the comparison, assuming that his systematic training with professional stunt coordinators had prepared him for any practical demonstration of ancient combat techniques. "Ready," called stunt coordinator Yakima Kanut, who had volunteered to oversee the demonstration using the same safety protocols that governed the film's action sequences. Douglas took his position with the systematic confidence that came from months of training with Hollywood's best stunt professionals. His preparation represented everything that serious research and professional coaching could achieve. But Sammy Davis Jr. had already demonstrated gladiatorial capability that appeared to operate according to different principles entirely. 0.04 seconds of precision that exceeded anything in Roman historical records and made Douglas's systematic training look like amateur preparation by comparison. Douglas stood frozen, staring at Sammy with the expression of someone whose understanding of history, capability, and intellectual authority had just been obliterated by evidence that transcended every framework he possessed. "Jesus Christ," Douglas whispered, using language that revealed how completely his expectations had been exceeded. But Sammy's response revealed not just superior capability, but understanding of historical authenticity that challenged fundamental assumptions about cultural expertise and scholarly authority. "Different kind of research, Kirk," Sammy said with characteristic understatement. "When you're genuinely interested in historical accuracy, you don't just read about ancient capabilities, you develop them." The conversation that followed lasted over an hour, during which Douglas learned more about Roman history, gladiatorial culture, and African contributions to ancient civilization than he had gained through months of expensive scholarly consultation. "Sammy," Douglas said finally, his voice carrying a humility that was completely uncharacteristic for Hollywood's most systematically confident producer. "Yeah, Kirk? I think I owe you more than an apology," Douglas said. I think I owe you a role in this movie, and acknowledgement that my historical research was incomplete in ways that actually compromised the authenticity I was trying to achieve. Sammy's response revealed the kind of class that had earned him respect throughout the entertainment industry. "Kirk, your commitment to historical authenticity is admirable," Sammy replied diplomatically. "What happened here just shows that authentic history is more complex and inclusive than standard education usually acknowledges." The encounter transformed not just Douglas's approach to the Spartacus production, but his understanding of what genuine historical accuracy required when it extended beyond conventional assumptions and included perspectives that mainstream research often overlooked. Years later, when Douglas was asked about the most important lesson of his producing career, he would often reference that afternoon on the Spartacus set as the day he learned the difference between expensive consultation and authentic knowledge. "Sammy taught me that real historical accuracy isn't about confirming your assumptions," Douglas explained during a later interview. "It's about researching thoroughly enough to discover when your assumptions are wrong, and being willing to change your approach when you encounter superior knowledge." The 0.04 seconds had lasted only an instant, but the education it provided would influence Douglas's approach to historical projects for decades, proving that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from having your expertise challenged by someone whose knowledge was developed through genuine curiosity rather than professional necessity. Kirk Douglas had entered that conversation as Hollywood's most historically informed producer, convinced that his research represented comprehensive understanding of ancient Roman culture. He left understanding that authentic historical knowledge often resided with people whose perspectives had been excluded from mainstream education, and that real accuracy required including rather than excluding the diversity that actually characterized ancient civilizations.